Don't skip. Your soulmate just found out someone is secretly jealous of you. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because this story is for you, and your heart needs this right now. Imagine someone sitting quietly by a window just as the sun begins to rise. The morning feels peaceful, yet something doesn't sit right in their heart. Over the past few weeks, they've noticed small things they couldn't explain. A conversation suddenly stopping when your name was mentioned. A smile that seemed genuine until you turned away. Compliments that somehow carried hidden criticism. At first, they dismissed these moments as coincidences. They told themselves they were overthinking. But the more they paid attention, the more one quiet truth began to emerge. Someone wasn't simply indifferent toward you. Someone was quietly struggling with feelings they refused to admit, and those feelings had slowly turned into jealousy. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. One afternoon, your soulmate met a group of familiar faces at a neighborhood cafe. The atmosphere seemed ordinary. People laughed over coffee, shared stories, and talked about everyday life. But every time your name entered the conversation, one person's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Their smile became forced. Their enthusiasm faded. They quickly changed the subject or offered a compliment that somehow felt hollow. Nobody else seemed to notice, but your soulmate did. They didn't immediately assume the worst. Instead, they became curious. Why would someone react so differently whenever your name appeared? As the conversation continued, they realized something important. Jealousy rarely announces itself loudly. It often hides behind polite words, quiet comparisons, or subtle attempts to minimize another person's light. It isn't always obvious, but its presence slowly reveals itself through repeated patterns. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Later that evening, your soulmate walked through a peaceful park, replaying the afternoon in their mind. The gentle breeze moved through the trees while children laughed nearby. Everything around them felt calm, yet one question continued echoing inside. Why would someone be jealous of a person who simply tries to live with kindness? The answer didn't come immediately. Instead, they remembered something an old mentor once told them. People often struggle most with the qualities they secretly wish they possessed themselves. Those words suddenly carried new meaning. Perhaps jealousy wasn't really about you. Perhaps it was about someone's own unresolved fears, insecurities, or comparisons. That realization didn't create anger. It created compassion. Because secure people rarely spend their energy trying to dim someone else's light. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. The next morning, your soulmate visited a small bookstore they often enjoyed. While browsing through the shelves, they found a journal with a sentence printed across its cover. Comparison steals gratitude. They paused. How many misunderstandings begin because people compare journeys that were never meant to be identical? Everyone carries different experiences, different struggles, different dreams. Comparing one life to another rarely creates peace. It only creates distance from our own blessings. As they closed the journal, they quietly smiled. The situation suddenly seemed much clearer. Jealousy wasn't proof that you had done something wrong. It was often evidence that someone else was wrestling with feelings they hadn't learned to heal. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. That afternoon, your soulmate spoke with an elderly gardener while helping water flowers in a nearby community garden. The gardener noticed they seemed thoughtful. Something on your mind? They nodded. I think someone may be carrying resentment towards someone they hardly know. The gardener gently placed another flower into the soil before replying. Flowers never stop blooming because weeds grow nearby. They simply keep reaching toward the sunlight. Those simple words stayed with them. Perhaps the healthiest response to jealousy isn't retaliation. It isn't proving anyone wrong. It's simply continuing to grow with humility and kindness. After all, flowers never compete with one another. Each blooms in its own season. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. As evening approached, your soulmate began noticing something else. The jealous person's comments weren't truly about your achievements. They weren't about your personality. They weren't even about your success. They were quiet attempts to make themselves feel more secure by diminishing someone else. And suddenly, everything made sense. People who know their own worth rarely need to question another person's. People at peace with themselves don't secretly celebrate someone else's setbacks. Instead, they encourage. They support. They celebrate. Because confidence creates generosity, while insecurity often creates comparison. Your soulmate quietly promised themselves they would never allow rumors, subtle negativity, or hidden resentment to become the foundation for their opinions about someone. They wanted truth, not assumptions. Character, not gossip. Reality, not appearances. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. Later that night, they returned home and opened a notebook resting beside the lamp. On a blank page, they slowly wrote. Today I learned that jealousy often says more about the pain someone carries than the person they envy. Kindness should never become smaller just because someone else misunderstands it. Light does not become brighter by extinguishing another candle. Real strength is choosing integrity even when comparison invites competition. They closed the notebook and looked out the window. The stars quietly filled the night sky. Everything felt still. Peaceful. Hopeful. They understood that discovering someone else's jealousy wasn't the most important part of the story. The important part was deciding not to let that jealousy create bitterness. Instead, they chose discernment, compassion, healthy boundaries, and the wisdom to recognize that another person's insecurity should never determine your value. But the story doesn't end here. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because if you're still here, this story is for you, and your heart needs this right now. The discovery wasn't over. In many ways, it had only just begun. Your soulmate couldn't stop thinking about the strange moments they had witnessed over the past few days. The forced smiles. The subtle remarks. The uncomfortable silence whenever your name entered the conversation. None of it seemed accidental anymore. Still, they refused to judge anyone too quickly. They believed that every action has a story behind it, and before reaching a conclusion, they wanted to understand what was really happening. The next morning, your soulmate took a long walk through a quiet park as sunlight filtered through the tall trees. Joggers passed by with friendly smiles, birds sang from the branches above, and the peaceful atmosphere gave them space to think. One question stayed with them the entire time. Why would someone feel threatened by a person who simply chooses kindness? The answer didn't arrive immediately. Instead, memories slowly connected like pieces of a puzzle. They remembered how that same person often compared themselves to others. They remembered conversations filled with self-doubt disguised as confidence. They remembered moments when every success story became a competition rather than an inspiration. And suddenly, something became clear. Jealousy often begins long before another person enters the picture. It begins when someone forgets their own value. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Later that afternoon, your soulmate visited a small cafe where they often enjoyed reading. Sitting near the window was an elderly teacher quietly writing in a notebook. After exchanging a few friendly words, the conversation unexpectedly turned toward human emotions. I've been thinking about jealousy, your soulmate admitted. The teacher smiled gently. Most people believe jealousy is about someone else. It usually isn't. It's often the voice of an insecurity asking, "Why not me?" Those simple words settled deeply inside. The teacher continued. When people heal their own hearts, they celebrate the success of others. But when old wounds remain untouched, comparison becomes easier than gratitude. Your soulmate thanked the teacher before leaving, carrying those words with them for the rest of the day. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Walking home, they realized something surprising. The person who seemed jealous wasn't truly competing with you. They were competing with an imaginary version of themselves they believed they should have become. That realization changed everything. Instead of anger, your soulmate felt compassion. Not because hurtful behavior should be ignored, but because wounded hearts often create unnecessary conflict without realizing it. Still, compassion didn't mean ignoring unhealthy behavior. It simply meant refusing to become bitter because of it. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. That evening, your soulmate attended a small neighborhood gathering. The atmosphere felt warm and welcoming. Families shared food, children played together, and neighbors exchanged stories from their week. Once again, your name naturally entered the conversation. And once again, the same subtle shift appeared. One person quickly interrupted. Another compliment became backhanded. Another smile disappeared almost instantly. This time, your soulmate noticed something they hadn't seen before. No one else seemed interested in comparing. No one else appeared uncomfortable. Only one person carried that invisible burden. It confirmed something important. Jealousy isolates the person holding it far more than the person it's directed toward. While everyone else enjoyed the evening, that individual remained trapped inside silent comparison. Your soulmate quietly hoped they would someday find peace within themselves. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. The following day, your soulmate visited a botanical garden filled with colorful flowers from every season. Roses bloomed beside lilies. Sunflowers stood proudly near delicate orchids. Each flower looked completely different. Yet none of them competed. A gardener nearby noticed your soulmate admiring the landscape. "They're beautiful together," your soulmate said. The gardener smiled. Because flowers don't waste time wishing they were someone else. They simply bloom where they're planted. Those words carried unexpected wisdom. People often forget that life isn't a race. Everyone grows at a different pace. Everyone carries different experiences, different challenges, different dreams. Comparison steals joy because it asks people to measure lives that were never meant to be identical. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. As sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and gold, your soulmate finally understood what this experience had been teaching them. The real danger wasn't someone else's jealousy. The real danger would be allowing that jealousy to create distrust, resentment, or unnecessary conflict. They refused to let that happen. Instead, they made a quiet promise. They would judge people by their character. Not by rumors. Not by hidden agendas. Not by whispered opinions. Truth deserved patience. Relationships deserved honesty. And kindness deserved protection. That promise brought a deep sense of peace. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Later that evening, they returned home and opened the journal resting beside their bed. On a fresh page they slowly wrote. Today I learned that jealousy is rarely about another person's light. It's often about forgetting your own. The answer isn't to shine less. The answer is to encourage everyone to discover the light already within them. They paused before writing one final thought. But compassion also requires wisdom. Healthy boundaries protect peaceful hearts. Closing the journal, they looked out at the quiet night sky. The stars hadn't become brighter because one cloud passed overhead. They had simply continued shining. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Never let another person's comparison convince you to hide your kindness. Never let someone else's insecurity decide your worth. Because people who truly know who they are don't compete with another person's journey. They celebrate it. But the story isn't over yet. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because if you've stayed with this story, your heart needs this right now. The discovery of hidden jealousy wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning of a deeper understanding. Your soulmate couldn't stop thinking about everything they had observed. The forced smiles. The subtle comments. The quiet attempts to create doubt. None of it felt random anymore. But instead of allowing suspicion to grow, they made a different choice. They decided they would never let someone else's negativity become the foundation of their opinion about you. They wanted truth, not assumptions. They wanted honesty, not rumors. And that decision quietly changed everything. The following morning, your soulmate woke before sunrise and took a slow walk through a peaceful nature trail. The air was cool, birds welcomed the new day with gentle songs, and sunlight slowly filtered through the trees. Everything around them felt calm, yet their mind remained focused on one important question. What if hidden jealousy has been influencing more than I realized? That thought stayed with them throughout the walk. They began remembering small situations that once seemed insignificant. A cancelled invitation. A conversation that suddenly felt distant. Advice that quietly encouraged doubt instead of understanding. At the time, none of those moments appeared connected. But looking back, they realized that negativity often grows in quiet ways before anyone notices. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Later that day, your soulmate visited a small library searching for a quiet place to think. While browsing the shelves, they came across a book containing a simple sentence. Truth survives even when opinions change. They stood there for several moments reading those words again and again. How often do people allow opinions to shape relationships before discovering the full story? How many misunderstandings begin because someone accepted a rumor without asking a single honest question? Those thoughts settled deeply within them. They promised themselves they would never allow gossip to become stronger than direct communication. Because healthy relationships deserve conversations, not assumptions. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. That afternoon your soulmate unexpectedly met an elderly woman feeding birds in a quiet town square. After a friendly conversation, they mentioned how difficult it can be to know who truly has good intentions. The woman smiled warmly. My grandmother used to tell me something. What was it? If someone constantly speaks about another person's faults, they may be revealing more about themselves than about the person they're criticizing. Your soulmate quietly reflected on those words. They suddenly understood that jealousy often tries to recruit other people into its perspective. It hopes repeated negativity will eventually become accepted as truth. But wisdom asks questions before forming conclusions. That realization brought unexpected peace. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Over the next few days, your soulmate became more observant. They noticed how certain conversations always seemed to drift toward comparison. Whenever someone achieved something meaningful, the jealous person immediately searched for flaws instead of celebrating them. Whenever kindness was mentioned, they found a reason to question motives. Whenever success appeared, they searched for hidden reasons instead of offering encouragement. Your soulmate no longer felt confused. They felt sad. Because they realized comparison had quietly stolen that person's ability to enjoy life. Instead of appreciating their own blessings, they remained focused on measuring themselves against everyone else. And comparison never creates peace. It only creates exhaustion. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. One evening, while watching the sunset beside a peaceful lake, your soulmate reflected on everything they had learned. The water remained calm despite leaves floating across its surface. The lake didn't become troubled because something landed upon it. It simply allowed the disturbance to pass. That image became a lesson. Perhaps peaceful people don't avoid negativity because it doesn't exist. They remain peaceful because they refuse to let negativity settle permanently inside them. Your soulmate decided that would become their approach as well. They would acknowledge unhealthy behavior. But they would never allow it to replace kindness with bitterness. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. That night, while writing in their journal, they reflected on trust. They realized trust isn't built by believing everything people say. It's built by observing actions over time. Actions reveal character far more honestly than opinions ever could. Someone may speak beautifully while acting carelessly. Someone else may speak very little while consistently showing kindness. Character always reveals itself eventually. Your soulmate wrote quietly. I will never allow someone else's insecurity to define how I see another person's heart. Truth deserves patience. Relationships deserve honesty. Trust deserves evidence, not assumptions. Those words felt like a promise. Not only to you, but to themselves. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. The next morning, they returned to the same cafe where this journey had quietly begun. Sitting near the window, they watched people greeting friends, sharing laughter, and enjoying simple conversations. They noticed something beautiful. People who carried genuine confidence celebrated other people's happiness naturally. They encouraged. They applauded. They smiled sincerely. There was no competition. Only connection. That became the final confirmation they needed. Real confidence creates generosity. Hidden insecurity creates comparison. The difference was impossible to ignore. Your soulmate quietly smiled. They knew exactly which kind of person they wanted to become. Someone who protected trust. Someone who asked questions before believing rumors. Someone who refused to let hidden jealousy destroy meaningful relationships. Someone who valued honesty above appearances. Because in the end, truth doesn't need loud voices to survive. It only needs patient hearts willing to seek it. The evening sky slowly filled with stars as your soulmate closed their journal one more time. Their heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because they had made an important decision. They would never allow another person's hidden jealousy to become the author of someone else's story. And perhaps that was the greatest act of loyalty of all. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because if you've stayed with this story until now, your heart needs this right now. The greatest discovery wasn't that someone had secretly been jealous of you. The greatest discovery was how your soulmate chose to respond once the truth became impossible to ignore. They realized that jealousy only has power when people allow it to shape their decisions. The moment they chose wisdom instead of reaction, everything began to change. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But quietly, steadily, and in a way that brought lasting peace instead of temporary satisfaction. The next morning, your soulmate woke before sunrise and walked to a quiet hill overlooking the town. The sky slowly changed from deep blue to shades of gold and soft pink. The cool morning breeze carried the scent of fresh grass, and for the first time in many days, their thoughts felt calm instead of crowded. They no longer wondered who had been speaking negatively. They no longer replayed every conversation. Instead, they asked themselves a different question. What kind of person do I want to become because of this experience? That single question changed everything. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Later that morning, your soulmate visited a peaceful lakeside where an elderly fisherman quietly prepared his boat. Watching the calm water, they asked him, "How do you keep the lake from becoming muddy when the wind stirs it?" The old man smiled kindly. "I don't. I simply wait. The mud always settles on its own." Those simple words carried unexpected wisdom. The truth works much the same way. False stories eventually lose their strength. Rumors eventually fade. Hidden jealousy eventually reveals itself through repeated actions. But honesty remains steady. Your soulmate realized they didn't need to expose anyone. Time was already doing that naturally. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. Because your heart needs this right now. As they continued walking, they noticed children playing together nearby. One little girl built a beautiful sandcastle while another admired it with genuine excitement. Instead of trying to knock it down, she smiled and asked if she could help decorate it. Your soulmate couldn't help smiling. Children often understand something adults forget. Someone else's beauty doesn't take away your own. Someone else's success doesn't reduce your possibilities. There is enough room for everyone to shine. Comparison creates imaginary shortages where none truly exist. Kindness creates abundance. That lesson settled deeply inside them. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. That afternoon, your soulmate returned to the same cafe where this journey had quietly begun. The familiar faces were there again. The conversation sounded much the same. But something had changed. The jealous person continued making subtle remarks. Only this time, no one joined in. People naturally shifted the conversation toward kindness, gratitude, and encouragement. Your soulmate realized something important. Negativity often survives only when others keep feeding it. When people choose wisdom instead, bitterness quietly loses its audience. They didn't need to argue. They didn't need to prove anyone wrong. They simply chose not to participate. Sometimes silence is strongest when it refuses to give life to unnecessary conflict. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. That evening, your soulmate visited the community garden once more. The elderly gardener smiled warmly as always. You look peaceful. I finally understand something, your soulmate replied. And what's that? I can't control how others see someone. But I can control whether I judge them fairly. The gardener nodded. Exactly. Weeds don't stop flowers from blooming. They simply remind gardeners where more care is needed. Those words stayed with your soulmate long after they left. Perhaps difficult people don't arrive to steal our peace. Perhaps they remind us how valuable peace truly is. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. As night slowly settled across the quiet streets, your soulmate returned home and opened the journal one final time. On a fresh page they wrote, "Today I discovered that jealousy cannot steal another person's light. It only darkens the heart carrying it. Kindness is not weakness. Discernment is not judgment. Healthy boundaries are acts of wisdom. And truth never needs another person's permission to remain true." They paused before writing one final reflection. I will never allow rumors to speak louder than character. I will never confuse comparison with reality. I will never let another person's insecurity decide someone else's worth. Closing the journal, they looked through the window. The stars quietly filled the night sky. None of them competed with one another. Each simply shone where it had been placed. Perhaps people were meant to do the same. Don't scroll. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. The message of this story was never that someone is secretly jealous of you or that a soulmate has uncovered hidden information. It is a fictional, inspirational story meant to remind us of something timeless. Jealousy often grows from comparison. Comparison grows from insecurity. But wisdom grows from self-awareness. The healthiest response to another person's envy is not revenge. It is integrity. It is kindness paired with healthy boundaries. It is refusing to let gossip replace truth. It is choosing conversations over assumptions. It is remembering that your value is never determined by another person's opinion. As your soulmate walked beneath the quiet stars one last time, they understood the greatest lesson of all. Real love protects. Real friendship encourages. Real maturity celebrates another person's success instead of competing with it. And real peace begins the moment you stop measuring your worth against someone else's journey. Because every flower blooms in its own season. Every sunrise arrives at the right time. And every heart shines brightest when it stops comparing itself to another.